Okay, are we recording? Okay. All right, welcome to Discover Your Inner Guru Week 2. Thank you all for being here and welcome. I hope you guys are enjoying what we've been experiencing so far with the Reboot and Reset for Success. If you haven't had a chance to delve into that, make sure that you log in to that program. Remember that the coupon code is Team Guru so that you can get it for free. And it's just really simple. Most everyone who has done it has been able to complete it in a day or two. There's some simple questionnaires. So if you haven't done that yet, I highly recommend trying to get that done soon, because the whole purpose for that is to clear the air, to clear the clutter, really get clear on your internal motivation, the type of motivation that's going to really get you up in the morning and keep you going when the going gets tough. And then it's going to help you get clear on your vision, whether it's your vision for the next week, the next month, your whole life, and even kind of connecting to what kind of legacy do you want to leave the world or leave your family and your kids. And so I have found that getting really clear, clearing the clutter, like to me, it's like this idea of getting my kitchen clean before I make a meal. Like it's difficult to make a meal in your kitchen if your sink is full of dishes, right? And so it's super, super important that you do that on some level. So just do your best, cater it to your unique situation and needs. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be exact. It's just that you're getting the ball rolling, okay? Just really quick disclaimer, I do not prescribe or treat medical conditions. I do not promise miracles of any kind. I do not claim to have all the answers or the answers for you. In fact, the whole purpose of this program is to inspire you and empower you to get your own answers, right? But all I can do is to share my experiences and the things that have worked really well for me and that I've seen work really well for my clients over the years. I'm still learning. In fact, I kind of went through, you guys saw that I posted on, some of you that are returning from the beta test, I posted on Discover Your Inner Guru private Facebook page asking for prayers, because I've been experiencing a lot of opposition, and I had a moment where I just wanted to quit. And this happens to me once in a while because it feels like a lot. It feels like every time I try to level up or I try to go to the next level of creating value for people, I get hit really hard. And the thing that hit me hardest was kind of what we're going to talk about today, was an aspect of what we're going to talk about today is this feeling of not knowing anything, this feeling of being vulnerable. And, you know, the more I learn, the more I realize the less I know. Charlotte, will you go ahead and mute yourself? Okay, we're good. We're good. And so it's very human nature to really dislike that space of discomfort when we're vulnerable, when we feel like we don't know anything. I think, especially for my personality type, I don't know if any of you have studied the personality types, but I have this very visionary warrior, or if you're a Carol Tuttle fan, I'm a 1-3. And so like, we don't really like to be wrong. We like to get it right. We like to know where we're going. And so I am continuously faced with this space of vulnerability and this feeling of not knowing. And it's actually one of the most beautiful spaces of learning that you can possibly find yourself in. It's just really uncomfortable. And so as I was in this space of discomfort and feeling a lot of opposition, it was the perfect opportunity for me to practice what I'm teaching. And I was so, so grateful for that. And even though I know those opportunities will keep coming, I'll keep feeling vulnerable, I'm going to keep soldiering on, because I know that what's being taught in this program is super inspired, whether I get it out there the way God wants me to or not, because I'm imperfect. It doesn't matter. What matters is, like, we live in a day and age where it's vital that we get in the driver's seat of our lives, of our health, of our minds, and our actions and our thoughts, that we are no longer in a state of what can be called unconscious reaction. where we're numb, or we just react to everything rather than really proactively, consciously, thoughtfully, mindfully taking steps into the future, choosing thoughts, choosing beliefs, words, and actions that will actually serve the highest good. And the world is crazy, right? We're experiencing a lot of upheaval, there's so much pain and there's so much turmoil going on in the world right now. And so it's so important that we learn how to get grounded to truth and to learn what it feels like and what it takes to connect to a space of peace and clarity and truth, regardless of what is happening around us. And that is how we're going to navigate what's going on in the world. That's how we're going to be our best selves. That's how we're going to fulfill our life's mission and purpose, whatever that is for you. So today we're going to talk about what I call the principle of loving what is, which is basically the things just are, and the principle of love, unconditional love, right? But I use the term loving what is because it's about connecting to the truth of what's happening in the present moment. And then we're going to delve into the skill. I like to teach principles and I like to teach skills of development that go with those skills, so that there's a practical application that goes in with that principle. So the skill is observation. Observational learning, free of shame, judgment, and expectation. So human nature is a really fascinating thing. I have just really enjoyed observing human nature. I was one of those kids who would get yelled at a lot for staring at people because I was just fascinated with what makes people tick. Why do they do what they do? And on some level, you know, science tells us that we're just wired, we come wired a certain way, right? There's just certain parts of us that just kind of tend to respond and react a certain way. And if you're religious at all, if you have this belief that there is this element of coming to earth to be our best selves, to learn and to grow and to quote unquote overcome the natural man, then we're learning how to observe the natural man tendencies and learn from them, and then consciously make a choice on how we want to move forward from there. So in human nature, there's a couple of things that I've noticed that apply to what we're talking about today. Number one is we have to make sense of everything. Have you noticed that? So like when we're in a situation and something happens, we're experiencing an emotion, and then suddenly we're like, our brain starts to go, well, it's this way because of this. Or I wonder if they did this because of that. Or we make it about ourselves, in that it means something about ourselves. For example, like, well, I can't lose weight, so I must be doing something wrong. So there's kind of a judgment energy there, or a shame energy there. Or my marriage is failing, so I must be unlovable. Or we just must not be compatible. So we as humans, we want to make sense of everything that's happening in our world, because that gives us security and safety and comfort of knowing why. And the truth is, we don't have to always know why to be able to make progress and to move forward. And we don't have to always feel comfortable to be actually safe. But human nature tells us, that fight or flight tells us, we've got, resist discomfort, resist vulnerability. It's that natural fight or flight response that happens, like that danger, like the amygdala goes crazy, and then we're like, I need to protect myself. And so we behave in a reactionary way to protect ourselves. So how different do you think your life could be if you actually had the skill of not giving into that human nature reaction, but you could actually observe that reaction, learn from it, and make a conscious choice to move forward in a way that might have been different before, that might be more serving of the highest good, what I call the highest good. So in this space of like trying to make sense of everything, we put judgments on things, right? So we tend to get caught up in the emotion as humans, rather than really seeing things as they really are. We see things from a lens of not only just the emotion, but the perception of our subconscious brain, the perception of what has already happened in the past. So we've compiled all this evidence of what's going to happen next because of what has already happened in the past, right? So our brains are just going through all this, okay, making sense of it, gathering the evidence, and there's all this emotion and the perception, and it's not always necessarily rooted in what's really happening in the moment, but more so the emotion and the perceptions. And so when shame gets in there, not just judgment of like having to make sense of it, but like there's this thing called shame that really can make things even more twisted and even more disconnected from what's true. And so I want to talk about shame for a minute. And I see shame as something that is not of God. Forgive me if you're not religious. I function from a very Christ-centered perspective in my work, and so you can totally adapt what I'm saying to your own belief system. But I feel that shame is a poison from Satan, from the adversary, and it keeps us from really fully being present in the moment. It warps our perspective of what's true. It disconnects us from love, and it disconnects us from our inherent worth and value. Okay. There's a quote by Brené Brown that's from her book, Rising Strong, that says, "Many of us will spend our entire lives trying to slog through the shame swampland to get to a place where we can give ourselves permission to both be imperfect and to believe we are enough." What if we could, what would be possible for you? How would your reactions, your choices, your thoughts, your beliefs be different if you could really find that place of giving yourself permission to be imperfect and to also know who you are as an infinite divine being? If we resisted the temptation of going into shame, judgment, or expectation of what the outcome should or shouldn't be. Some of you have worked with me. We've talked about the word of like being should upon and how that's messy business, pun intended. What would be possible if we learn to experience life in a space of observation? In science, they call this observational learning. And really the simple idea is that, people learn by observing others, and they might adapt their behavior based upon, like children, for example, they observe adults, and so they learn behavior based on what they're observing. Well, if you take that to the next level of, okay, I can observe something, I can learn from it, and I don't necessarily mimic that behavior, but I learn from that behavior what I'm seeing and observing works and what doesn't work, and then I can make a conscious choice for myself of where I want to go from there. And then I want to take it even to the next level where you're literally observing yourself. You're observing your own behavior, your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own reactions. Okay. So what do I mean by observation specifically? That was kind of a description of observational learning, but what I mean by observation, this is a space of an open space of learning where you're putting all judgments to the side. It's open and accepting of what is in the moment. So I kind of describe it like you're watching through the window of a science experiment lab, right? You're just kind of standing there at the window and you're watching and you're going, oh, I'm noticing this, and see how they took their scalpel there, and did you see how like they reacted this way when they did that? That's really interesting. So you're kind of just gathering data. Does that make sense? You're gathering data and information, and so that you can learn from it. So as you're gathering the data, you're kind of we can actually use human nature to our benefit, where we do want to make sense of things, but if it's free of that shame or judgment, it's like okay, I'm just gathering it, and we're going to kind of bring it all together, and we're going to see if we can notice any patterns. We're going to see if we notice any connections, and it's more from a space of curiosity. So that's the distinction I want to impress upon you today, is the distinction in observation, the distinction between curiosity versus shame or judgment, or having to make sense of it, right? So you're just like, oh, I'm just fascinated by what's happening here and learning. And so if I'm in a space of observation for myself, I'm consciously choosing to put the judgment and shame to the side. And I'm just watching myself. Well, that's interesting. I just yelled at my kids. I didn't feel irritable 5 minutes ago. Why would I yell at my kids? Interesting. And I might ask the question why, but I'm not going to rush to finding an answer. I'm just going to go, oh, interesting. I wonder why that is. And then I kind of just let myself sit with it. And we're going to go in a little bit more detail of like what this actual process looks like. But I want to help you guys really understand what I mean by this space of observation. So the important thing is that you're connecting to what is actually true in the moment, not what we perceive might be true. So part of your observation might be, okay, so I'm perceiving this, like this is what feels real, right? Here's another distinction. What's real and what is true aren't necessarily the same thing. Okay, so what's real is what you're experiencing and what you're perceiving, because that's what feels real to you, right? And I feel like it's important to acknowledge to yourself and honor what feels real, because think about it. If a child were to come to you hurting and upset, hey, so-and-so threw their toy at me and it hit my head and it hurt, and I totally lost my train of thought. It's okay. I'll find it again. Help me out. What did I just say? Do you guys ever do that? Oh, you're all muted, so I can't hear you if you're helping me out. It's okay. All right, so you're connecting to what's true in the moment. And okay, so a child comes to you and you can either say, well, go off and play and suck it up, buttercup, or you can sit them on your lap and you can say, oh, well, what happened? And the child might be perceiving that, oh, they hate me because they threw a toy at me. You can see that, oh, the truth is they threw a toy at you because they're two and they're in cause and effect stage. And they're like, what will happen when I throw this toy? It's like, oh, cool. Look, I threw a toy and it hit her head and she cried. Because at that cognitive level, so you as the adult can see. So you're kind of putting yourself in the position of the adult or the outside observational viewer, where you're like, okay, well, here's what's happening. Okay, I can see, and you're acknowledging that part of you that like, hey, they hate me because they threw the toy at me, and you're kind of acknowledging what feels real in the moment. But then on the other side, then you're observing, but what actually happened? What I can be absolutely 100% certain is true is that a toy hit my head because someone threw it. That's it, right? That's all that was true in the moment. All that other stuff, like they hate me, they don't want to be my friend anymore, or now I'm mad. I mean, see how there's all that emotion wrapped up into it, but that felt real in the moment. And so there's that distinction between what's true and what's real. So acknowledge what's real, but then in that observation, you're kind of trying to get to the core of what is true. And there's a book that I highly recommend that you read, because to me, it's like next to the scriptures. I know that probably sounds crazy, but it's a book by Byron Katie called Loving What Is. And there's 4 questions that she addresses. It's Loving What Is, 4 Questions That Can Change Your Life by Byron Katie. And one of the questions she asks is, can I be absolutely 100% certain that this is true? If I can't answer that just with full confidence, yes, this is absolutely true, then it's probably not true. But I might observe and I might acknowledge in that moment, but it feels true, right? It feels true to every fiber of my being. And so that acknowledgement, just like you would acknowledge a child of like, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way, right? It's going to be a lot healthier for their brain development and their soul development that you acknowledge their pain and that you love on them for a minute. They can move on. Than if you just shoo them off and pat their bum and say, get over it, right? And so we want to offer that same love and acknowledgement to ourselves as if we were that child. Because the truth is, we really still are that child. There's still pieces of us that are trapped, literally trapped in things that happened as children, because as our brains were developing, our ability to perceive the world from a space of truth was very limited, right? We notice everything as a kid, right? We hardly miss anything that's going on, but our ability to really perceive from a space of what reality is oftentimes thwarted or warped by our underdeveloped brains. And we're little and the world is big, and we experience it differently than a fully developed adult brain. Okay, and that leads me to kind of sharing a little bit more detail about how the subconscious mind works. And those of you that took my last course, this might be a repeat for you, so I apologize. But it's always good to repeat things because that's how we learn, right? So here's some facts about your subconscious mind. And I'm talking about this inner child in us. There's not just the parts of our inner child that are wounded, but our subconscious brain basically functions at the cognitive ability of an 8 to 10-year-old. Okay, it records everything. It doesn't matter if you're awake or asleep, the tape is constantly running on record. It's always alert and awake, and it hears everything you say or think. My kids get so bugged at me when they're teasing each other and they're saying things, because it seems to be kind of a popular thing with teenagers right now to like diss on each other in a joking way, and it's sort of like endearing. And I'm like, kids, you can't do that, because your subconscious is hearing that literally. So every word that you speak to them that is jokingly unkind, their subconscious takes it literally and hears it. And so every word matters. The subconscious controls 95% of our lives, especially if we're living from a space of unconscious reaction and not this conscious creation space. It's also built on habituation, right? So those neural pathways in the brain get formed, and those habitual patterns of behavior happen because that's what's been programmed in our brain, in our subconscious. And so it's like, I can't tell you how many things in this space of observation I've become aware of where I'm like, why do I do that? Like, when did that even start? And why, like, that's so bizarre that I would behave that way when I don't even believe that in my heart. And so I had to kind of get to the root of, and in my observation of, okay, when did that programming start? What's the belief behind that programming? Okay, so, and because that's where we can change our habits, is to really get to the reprogramming those neural pathways in the brain. And it takes everything literally, your subconscious. And it's 1 million times, sorry, not 100 million, 1 million times more powerful than the conscious mind. It's not logical, it is a feeling mind. Okay, so again, it's like functioning at the cognitive ability of an 8 to 10-year-old. So if we're living unconsciously and reactionary, we're literally being controlled by the 8 to 10-year-old version of ourselves. That was like a huge mind blow moment for me when I realized that. Like, what? Like, that is not okay, to be ruling my life being ruled by my 8 to 10-year-old self. I remember myself as an 8 to 10-year-old, and it wasn't pretty. Okay, so I like to treat whatever comes to the surface as a gut reaction in any given situation. Like I was saying before, a small child a small child still learning, still needing love, still needing attention, still developing. Okay. And so in that perspective, like I always tell myself, okay, how would I treat my child if they came to me with this problem or this feeling or this belief? How would I react? Would I want to go into fixing or shutting down or ignoring or whatever because I'm too busy doing something else? No, I would want to give them my full attention, and I would want to come to their level of development. Okay. So in observation, we acknowledge our feelings, we recognize what is true, we make a conscious, clear-headed decision about what to do about those feelings and beliefs. Can you see how powerful this space of observation can be, you guys? Rather than becoming hindered and held back by our negative emotions or controlled by our negative emotions and perspectives, you can become free. You can be free to change your response, to change your perspectives, to act in a different way, to get out of the hamster wheel of those habitual patterns of behavior, you know, that aren't getting you where you really want to be, and into healthier patterns of behavior, healthier patterns of thought. Okay. So really, truly, this space of observation, the skill of observation, and the conscious choosing to love what is in the moment, like acknowledging that, okay, what is happening in this moment just is. It's not good or evil, it just is. And if you can see it from that observational space without all the judgment and emotional, like, you'll be amazed at what you will notice that you didn't notice before. You will be amazed at the bird's eye view that will kind of open up to you of what's really happening in the moment. So it's powerful, and it's so essential to discovering your inner guru, and really, to me, is kind of the foundation of this program of what I'm teaching. And so it'll kind of be something that comes up a lot week after week, because it takes conscious, consistent practice. Okay, so here are a few ways that I've learned how to practice the skill of observation. The first one is just really simple. Just change your language. Use words and phrases that invite observation and love rather than that judgment or shame. And again, just to clarify, I don't think there's anything wrong with or invaluable in saying, well, why is this happening? Because that's just inquisitive curiosity, right? Well, what's going on here? It's when we start to add things like, well, that shouldn't be happening, or I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have done that. It's when we start to add that extra layer of shame and judgment where we get muddled, okay, and where we kind of start to get stuck. So I have compiled, I'm going to screen share here for a minute. A list, and this is in Discover Your Inner Guru. You'll go to module 2, which is week 2. And I've downloaded 3, and you don't have to go there right now. I've downloaded 3 worksheets. Okay. Oh, that's not it. Okay, we're gonna open. Okay, here we go. Where'd it go? Where'd you go? There we go. Okay, so here are the words and phrases that invite or support a space of observation and love, okay? And some of these phrases are things that you might decide to put in your own words and type out and have like around your house to remind you of the truth, okay? Of just the overall truth. So here is an overall truth statement that I really like to use for myself. What I do, feel, say, or believe is not who I am or a reflection of my value and worth. When we can just recognize that we are just human beings on this earth having an experience of learning, and just like a toddler is learning how to walk, they need like that love and support. We get excited when our toddler falls flat on their face. We give them love, but it's like it's because we recognize as the parent that they're learning, right? If we can give ourselves that same kind of support and excitement and realize that falling on our face is not a reflection of who I am and my value, it just means that I tripped, you know, that I'm lacking information or that I'm lacking experience. Okay, so the next phrase is, how other people interact with me is not a reflection of who I am or my worth and value. In fact, you guys, the truth is how people treat you is most often a reflection of how they feel about themselves, right? And so if you can remember that, I think it's one of the greatest influencers in how we judge or shame ourselves is how we are perceiving how other people see us and how they're treating us or the words they're saying to us. And if we can disconnect from, you remember if you've done the reboot and reset and that part of connecting to your why, that distinction between an internal versus an external motivation, the same principle applies here, where you're trying to connect to your internal infinite worth that is not based upon your actions, not based upon your words, not based upon how other people see you, but who you already are and who you know you are. That's just a really important thing to remind yourself. All right, so what's happening right now just is, and it doesn't mean anything about me. Okay, I'm in charge of me, and I like this one because I know it kind of sounds like something you would tell a kindergartner. I'm in charge of me, but it's so true, like, because I am in charge of me, and so oftentimes when we're in shame and judgment, we're also in victimhood. And it's like we're in blame, and it's like it's not my fault because we're uncomfortable. And as long as we're in shame or judgment, it's like then I must be bad, or there must be something wrong with me. It must mean something negative about me. And so I don't want to feel that discomfort anymore. So it's just easier. My effort to not be uncomfortable anymore goes to blaming someone else for why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. And that doesn't serve either, right? So being fully transparent with yourself in the space of observation, taking complete charge and responsibility for how you're behaving is really, really vital and important here. Okay, I allow others their experience, right? They can show up for you in a certain way and you can be like, well, they're not really showing up for me. They're just having their experience, and I can allow that. That doesn't mean that you allow someone to physically harm you. That doesn't mean you continually put yourself in a situation of abuse and toxicity. That doesn't mean you're not setting healthy boundaries, but you're disconnecting your experience from how someone else is showing up, and you're just allowing yourself to have your experience, allowing them to have their experience. I choose how I get to react to my feelings about what I'm experiencing. And this is a powerful one because oftentimes I have felt like I'm a slave or a victim to my feelings. For many, many years, it was like, well, that's just how I feel. And yes, it's true that triggers happen, the feelings come, and there's kind of that gut reaction because of those triggers. But ultimately, you get to react and choose that reaction regardless of how intense those feelings are. Because remember, I talked about going into the space of curiosity. The observation is curiosity rather than judgment or making sense of it. It's like, well, that's interesting. I'm feeling sadness right now. I take a deep breath. I'm wondering why is that? Okay, well, I'm just going to sit with this sadness for a minute. And this next one's fun. Well, isn't that fascinating? I love the word fascinating because to me, it's like, oh, it invites me into curiosity rather than judgment, okay? And it might be something that's really deeply triggered me. I'm like, wow, I'm really fascinated by how that person is showing up for me. And I'm observing ... Like, for example, like fascinating. That car just cut me off and my heart is racing because I feel really unsafe right now and I want to punch them in the face. You know what I mean? Like my personality tends to go to rage and like you know, I want to just beat the crap out of somebody when I'm mad and not, oh, I'm so sorry. You know, like I have a really feisty side to me. And so like when I'm really in my human self, it's fascinating when that not so higher self part of me comes out. And my instinct would be to want to run them off the road. And so as I'm learning how to, that's rather than, I don't actually run them off the road because then I usually have my kids in the car and I wouldn't want to put them in danger or have my car be in the shop, right? But it happens sometimes. And so I'm observing sometimes in hindsight, right? And I might be saying, wow, that's fascinating. I totally just wanted to flip them off, you know? And why is that? Why did that create so much anger inside of me? And then I just kind of allow that to process and sit with that. And it's uncomfortable. But when I'm in fascination, it's not as uncomfortable as judgment. Judgment's way more of a struggle and way more of a discomfort than curiosity and fascination. You guys understand? And maybe I'm repeating myself too much. So another phrase would be, I'm experiencing this feeling of anger, for example, because my husband didn't show up on time when he said he would, right? Because blank, blank, blank just happened, right? So you're basically making a statement of, this is what happened. This is what I'm feeling. I'm acknowledging what I'm feeling. I'm not saying that my feelings are right or wrong. And there's no judgment. It's just, that's what is, okay? And then a couple more phrases that you might have around if you're someone who, your house, to remind you for kind of an overall statement of truth is that my feelings are important, right? Just because our feelings sometimes don't show like the kindest side of ourselves, it doesn't mean they are any less important. In fact, those are the ones that probably need to be heard and acknowledged the most. And the last one is my favorite. I love learning from others and my experiences because, you guys, the truth is, if you choose to believe this truth that I have found to be truth, like it will absolutely change your life if you don't already subscribe to this belief. But the belief is that everything and everyone is my teacher and is there for my good. Because if I can learn something from it, and from them, from the situation, from those circumstances, it's priceless. It's a gift. It's beautiful. And it doesn't matter how uncomfortable it is. It doesn't matter how assaulting or traumatic it might have been in the moment. If I learned something from it, if that experience has helped me become a better person, helped me see a new perspective or think a new thought, or to maybe have a new experience that now allows me to have a deeper sense of empathy for another human being because I've now had a similar experience to them. And now I really can empathize with them, like, wow, I've been there, so I really can feel what they're feeling. Like, you guys, that's powerful. These are powerful lessons and a gift that that are priceless, in my opinion. Okay, so that's one way that you can kind of get yourself in the space of observation, right? These are the kind of phrases that sort of just shift that energy from the shame and judgment into this observational learning space. Okay. The next, how are we doing? We're doing good. Okay. I've created kind of a 4-step process. For those of you that really like systems and really like a step-by-step process, I've broken it down into these steps. Here we go. Okay. So this is just a practical application approach to managing your emotions and your reactions to stress. Now, when you're first learning the system, it might feel awkward. It might feel, I don't know, difficult. If you're more of an intuitive, flowing kind of person, just read through it and try to see if you can understand the principle that is in each each point, and I'll share what I believe the principles are as we go along here. So the first step in this practicing the skill of observation sort of system or practical application approach is, number one, to stop and breathe. So the principle behind this is just that we are just from a science perspective, we need to bring the stress level down. Okay, when our stress levels are high, we aren't able to think clearly. Okay, we're in fight or flight mode, and we're trying to get the heck out of Dodge. We're trying to hide or fight in the situation. And so if we can stop and breathe, breath work is one of the main go-tos in psychotherapy with when you're dealing with trauma reactions and triggers to help bring the body, lowering the stress. Okay, so as you're stopping and breathing, you're noticing any urge to suppress, you're observing any desire to push aside or carry on. And now so I want to focus on this for just a minute. If you are noticing that you're wanting to suppress, just because you're learning new information here, and I'm inviting you to not be judgy and not shame it, your old patterns might be pretty set in those old neural pathways in the brain. And so if you tend to start judging it, observe yourself judging it. You're like, oh, that's interesting. I'm totally judging the fact that I'm suppressing this. Because then you might hear yourself say the words or think the words, I shouldn't be suppressing that. Or I shouldn't be pushing that aside, you know, or this carry on attitude of like, well, suck it up, buttercup. We just need to push on. And honestly, there are situations where I do need to just push on, you know, that there may not be the luxury of totally stopping my whole world and going, I will now go into a deep state of meditation, because that's not always practical, right? And this is meant to be a practical application. So most of the time, I am carrying on with my life, but at the same time, I'm observing. My thoughts and my heart are kind of putting attention on what the things are that I'm observing. And I'm 9 times out of 10, 9.99%, whatever, percent of the time, I am going about my business, and I'm not totally setting aside and stopping everything and spending 30 minutes to an hour meditating on what I'm observing, because that's not practical, right? We need to be able to like do this in a pinch. So this is what it looks like for me. Okay, I'm having a trigger response right now, and I'm noticing my heart rate is rising, my you know, I'm feeling anger or whatever it is, and I'm just going to breathe, right? So I'm taking that deep breath. Taking in oxygen is the simplest way to keep the spirit connected to the body. Okay, so this is something that kind of is talked about in energy work a lot, but not necessarily talked about in mindfulness or psychotherapy or whatever. The spirit and body, the spirit tries to leave the body sometimes. And so that's not good. The spirit needs to be fully connected to the body, because we need the body and we need to be fully integrated in the body for the body to really learn, and for those neural pathways in the brain to actually change the way we would like them to change. Okay, so take a breath. It's simple and it's fast, right? It only takes 2 seconds to breathe. Number 2, you're connecting to what is true. You acknowledge what can be, that you can be 100% certain is fact true about your circumstances. And we've kind of already talked about this, like, okay, so in this moment, what feels real is that my counterpart doesn't love me anymore because they threw a toy at my head. What's really true about what happened is that person picked up a toy and threw it at my head, and it hurt me. It hurt me physically, right? So that's the 100% certain I know is true. What I don't know is their motivation. I don't really know why they did it, and I don't really know that they don't like me anymore, right? That's fabricated. That comes from an emotional state and false perception. it might be true that they're mad at me. It might be true that they hate me now, right? But I don't really know that for certain. Okay. So I'm only going to connect to what's absolutely 100% factual. Okay. And then I'm going to acknowledge what isn't true or is not within my realm of influence or control. Okay. So is it really true that they hate me? I don't know. So I'm not going to focus on that. And it's not in my control anyway, because that's their choice. They're choosing that emotion if it's true for them. And I don't have any control over how they're choosing to show up. And it's just so much easier to just go, oh, it's not mine, right? Yay. You know, I can let that go and I can give that back to them. Okay, so you're connecting to what's true, not what's real. There's that distinction, remember? So remember that distinction. If you're saying, well, this isn't real, consider that you're actually telling that hurting part of you, you don't matter. So be careful with the words that you're using to yourself. Instead of saying, well, this isn't real, and making a statement, you might actually ask a question. It's much more powerful to ask yourself a question. So I invite you to just actually sit with this for a minute. Okay, so you've got, on one hand, you could make a statement and say, this is happening right now. Or you can say, is this happening? Sit with that for a minute. To me, I feel a much lighter, a much more open energy with a question rather than with a statement, hard-handed, like, this is what's absolutely true, right? Okay, well, I know it's true that this was thrown at my head and it hurt and I cried and now I have a bruise on my head, okay? Okay, so it just takes the emotion out of it, okay? All right, so number 2, connect to what is true. Number 3, make a conscious decision of reaction. All right, you can choose acceptance and love versus shame, judgment, resentment, anger. And when you're new at this, you might still make a conscious decision to react in a negative way. You might still make a conscious choice to judge because you might not feel ready not to judge. I know this sounds kind of weird because like in a lot of like religious culture, it's just like, well, just be grateful, just focus on the positive. Well, sometimes you don't feel grateful and you can't force gratitude, right? And it's, to me, so invalidating and it's so like shaming and not productive to tell someone that, to say, well, just focus on the positive. Like, okay, so eventually they might be ready to come around to that and see the good, but right now they're hurting and they don't know what to do with that. And so when we can treat ourselves with that kind of respect, like, okay, right now I'm hurting, right now I am angry and I'm resentful, right? And so I might make a conscious decision to actually sit with that a little bit longer, right? But I might make a conscious choice to do it in private or to write it out on paper or to go beat the crap out of a punching bag instead of the actual person. Like Taekwondo for 2.5 years was like my saving grace when I was processing some really, really deep childhood trauma and rage and anger towards my dad. And, you know, like every time I took a man down in self-defense class that was like 280 pounds and I took him to the ground, it was like the most satisfying thing and so healing to my soul. But it was in a controlled environment where it was appropriate, right? I had permission from him to do that. And it wasn't really him I was beating up, right? It was the person that I was inside, my little girl self was angry at. And so I can make a conscious choice to be with that emotion a little longer, but then I might channel it in a healthier way, okay? How will you react differently? How will you react towards others or circumstances? And what beliefs or perceptions will you choose moving forward? So you might, in your observation, say, okay, well, I'm perceiving, and this was part of step 2, right, of connecting to what's true. My perception is my husband doesn't care because he didn't show up on time. But what's really true is my husband didn't show up on time because he didn't show up on time. That's all I know, right? I may not know the full picture yet, and I might find out later that, oh, he ended up having to change a poopy diaper and was delayed. So it really wasn't about whether he cares or not, right? So my choosing, if in this sense of like, okay, I'm going to choose maybe a different perception, I may not have all the facts yet, right? So I might say, well, I don't have all the facts. I don't have all the information. This is all I know is true. And so I'm going to choose to give them the benefit of the doubt. So I might not choose an actual perception other than I'm going to hope for the best, right? And then most importantly, how will you react or show up for yourself, right? What thoughts and what beliefs about yourself are you going to choose to perpetuate moving forward? Okay, so you might have in your observations identified some beliefs about yourself, like I'm not worthy of love, or you know, that person who threw a toy at my head doesn't love me anymore, and so that must mean about me that I'm not lovable, right? Do you see where I'm going with this? And so in your observations, you'll kind of, as you get better at it, you'll learn to go a little bit deeper each time and get more clarity on, okay, well, what does that really mean about me? What am I choosing to believe about myself? And then how can I shift that? What do I get to change? And I'm breaking this down. And as I'm breaking this down, it might seem like this process takes a long time. As you get good at it, it can be a millisecond. I'm not kidding. Like, you take a breath, and while you're breathing, you're connecting to what's true in the moment, right? What's 100% true. And you're making a conscious decision, okay, I'm not going to punch them in the face, but I might go in my room privately and punch a pillow. Okay. And you're making a conscious decision how to react and what you're going to do with that. And then when that energy kind of moves through you and subsides, then that's where you might make a decision about, okay, moving forward, how do I want to react differently? And that might look like, okay, I'm making a conscious decision to actually spend some time in my, you know, daily meditation, God time, or whatever it is you call it, your spiritual time, or your just journaling, you know. I might spend some time tomorrow trying to get to the root of why I even had that trigger reaction. Okay, so that might be something you'd consciously decide to do moving forward. Okay. And that would be step 3, okay? Connect to inspired thought and take conscious action. Now, sometimes in the moment, you're not feeling very inspired because you're taking a breath, you're connecting to what's true, and you're observing things, but you still might be in that emotion. You might still be feeling it really strongly. And so you may not feel super confident in your ability to connect to inspired thought when you're new to this process. That's okay. I will tell you and testify to you that you will learn how to be totally inspired in the midst of discomfort, vulnerability, and trigger. Like, it will be this coolest dichotomy. You'll know, like, you've really mastered this on a certain level when, like, for example, I had an anxiety attack recently that, like, I haven't had an anxiety attack in ages. But when this happened, usually in the past, it was like happened all the time, and I would totally become enslaved by that anxiety attack, and I would just be taken over. Well, this time, my body was going through the motions. I was, you know, hyperventilating kind of, and I was sobbing and crying, and my body was kind of moving and processing this energy. But the really connected, conscious, observational part of me was talking to myself and saying, hey, it's okay. Like someone else was there saying, hey, I know you're in trauma and it's okay. Just keep breathing. You're doing great. And I was doing that for myself. And it was the coolest thing that I could show up for myself in that way in the midst of trigger. Okay. And so this step 4, that's a typo. Funny. I'll fix that. Connect to inspired thought and take conscious action. So it's like I'm in the midst of this trauma reaction where my body's processing something and it's moving through and and manifesting itself through as an anxiety attack, which I've now learned that anxiety attacks are more of a signal that something is built up in your system, and the energy, emotions, whatever it may be, has finally come to a head and is just simply, the dam is broke and you just need a release. So anxiety attacks, as scary as they feel, are actually really healthy and really amazing in just getting all that energy out of you. So if you can just let it move, let yourself cry it out and breathe through it, it's amazing. So step 4, to me, it just looks like, okay, I'm asking for my next step and I'm trusting the first thing that comes. Okay, the first thought that comes to my mind. If I don't get anything, then I go on with my day. I just kind of skip that step. I don't even care. It's like, okay. And if it comes instantly to me, then I know, okay, there's something to act upon, because step 4 is kind of optional at times. Like sometimes it's not even applicable. Sometimes it's not necessary to, okay, I will now connect to inspired thought. Because to me, inspired thought comes in the flow. It comes totally like easy. It comes like if it's needed and if it's information that you need. And last in the beta test, I talked about that. But excuse me, that breadcrumb, all you need is your next breadcrumb, right? All you need is your next step. And if it doesn't come easy, if it doesn't present itself, then you don't need it. You don't need a next step, right? What you did was enough, right? Just acknowledging it, connecting to what's true, making a choice of what you're going to believe about yourself or others or that situation into the future, okay? Is that making sense? Does anyone have any questions? Go ahead and unmute yourself and share if you don't have any questions. Okay, awesome. So as we're winding down here, we only have a few more minutes left. This is your homework for the day. Finish the reboot and reset for success. And even if you just do it on a really basic level where you go through each of those processes just briefly, that's going to be better than not doing it at all, okay? And you log into a beautifullifementoring.vipmembervault.com, and that link here is in your email actually, and I got the right one. Guys, thanks for your patience, by the way, of getting that link totally wrong. I put www down instead of the HTTPS whatever. So if you don't put the www, you'll find it. But the link is correct now in the latest email. And just go to that site, log in, and then click on the reboot and reset for success. If you haven't already signed up for that, use the coupon code TEAMGURU to get it free, and just go through the modules and the lessons on that. And the videos from last week is posted on Discover Your Inner Guru course. So click on that, and that's where you can access all the videos. It does take a while, apparently a couple hours, to download the video. So as soon as we're done here, I will download get that started, and hopefully by later this afternoon it will be officially posted, so that you can access that and rewatch. So, but the video from last week is available, and it's on module 1 of Discover Your Inner Guru. So this week will be module 2, week 2, and under the lesson will be the 3 the pages that I had showed you on the screen share of the words and phrases, the observation. Oh, here, I didn't go over this. I better go over this. Hold on. There's a 3rd page that I didn't go over with you, and I wanted to do that. Let's see. No, that wasn't it. Okay, so I've included this guide sheet. Where did it go? Here we go. So this is kind of just meant to be a guide for you to refer to as you're practicing the skill of observation. These are just some possible things that you can observe and document. I'm not going to totally read through all that right now because we're running short on time, but that's just something. Just know that that's in the files in week 2, lesson 1, okay? And that just gives you some ideas on, okay, more specifics of what you're paying attention to, what you're observing, okay? Okay, just want to make sure that I filled you in on that. Okay, so number 1, finish the reboot and reset for success. This is your homework. Number 2, practice the skill of observation and begin keeping a journal, whether it's just sort of in your head or an actual journal that maybe you spend some time each night writing down, or maybe you have on your phone in the notes app, you know, just start typing in, this is what I've observed. And it may, if you didn't have time in that moment to actually go through the 4 different steps, you might go back and do it later. Or you might take some inventory at the end of the day and say, what did I learn from my observations? Okay, and that's something that I like to do when I'm quiet. Sometimes, now that I've gotten really a lot better at it, I can, you know, connect to lessons in the moment. But in the beginning, reserve maybe that, what are my lessons? Because right now you're just wanting to be present with what you're feeling and experiencing, and the lessons will make manifest later. Okay, when the dust settles, right? Let the dust settle a little bit, and then you can learn more easily. I find that, like, when I'm teaching my kids, that in the height of the emotion is not the time to teach them, right? It's the time to acknowledge and observe and help them through that observation. And then later I might say, so remember when you were really upset about this? Like, what did you learn from that? Did you learn anything? I'm just curious. And those are the moments that actually are more effective, because that they've allowed that dust to settle. And then just refer to those files that I have in there to help you throughout the week. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to send me a text or a Facebook message. I'm going to be doing the, for this week, the Q&A is going to be changed to a different time. So Thursday at 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time, because I'm teaching a Reiki class. But I also think it's a great opportunity for us to experiment with different times, because a lot of you aren't able to make that 10 a.m. time. I only had a few of you come on last week's, and the Q&A is something that is so much, it's so important to me that we get that practical application in. And last week we had a really beautiful opportunity to help one of the participants really in live, right then and there, process something that she has been feeling blocked with for a lot. And I was able to kind of show her how I would use these skills that we're learning to help her through that. And so those are going to be, I think, even more powerful sometimes in some ways than the content. So Thursday at 7 o'clock, I think that's all that I have to say. Thank you everyone for coming. And I'm going to check the chat just really quick. Oh shoot, Charla, I'm sorry about that. Is that what, Dave?
Is that 7 o'clock a.m. or p.m.?
I can't hear what you're saying.
Thursday, is that 7 o'clock a.m. or p.m.?
PM, in the evening. So is that every single week, Charla? So that would basically never work for you, right? Okay. Let me rethink this. Okay, maybe would 7 p.m. work on Friday for all of you that are on here? Just go ahead and give me a thumbs up if that. I can't see everyone that's on here because not everyone's on video. But would Friday at 7 p.m. work? Okay, Valerie, good. Charla, would that work? No? Not sure. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to connect with that and then I'll send you guys. Okay. But that would be fine. I don't mind. That wouldn't be a distraction because you could be on mute and then, yeah, that's not even an issue at all. Okay. All right. We'll plan on, I'm going to send an email with the final time. So Thursday, I don't want to do Thursday at 7 if Charlotte can't be there because I really want to find a time that works for everybody. If you have times specifically that don't work, if you could email that to me and respond to the email I sent last night, that would be great because then I'll be able to find a time that works for all of us. Okay. If you haven't connected with your accountability partners, please do so, even if you're just checking in with a, hey, how you doing? If that's it, like just having someone there to be accountable to is really powerful and important. And do it in the way that honors you. Okay. All right. I love you guys. We'll talk to you later on in the week. See you later.
Bye.